Indulge me, if you will, please. An example. You ain't got no pancake mix. Ah, yes. But you see, what you're actually saying... You ain't got no pancake mix. ...is that I do have pancake mix. Because, you see, you're employing what's called a double negative. What's wrong with you, and man? That means that you actually mean the opposite of what you're saying. Can you guess which English myth we're talking about today? That's right, folks. Never use a double negative. Now, like I said before, you kind of want to never say never when it comes to these rules. And I'll tell you why. Let me tell you something about language. Now, most of the time when I'm talking about guidelines and rules on this channel, I'm giving you lessons on writing, especially in academic papers. But before we get into the etiquette for academic papers regarding double negatives, let's just talk about language in general first. The primary purpose of language is to communicate. And in some English-speaking cultures, they do communicate using double negatives quite frequently. The pancake mix guy is a great example. He obviously wasn't serious about what he was saying. I mean, he wasn't literally trying to say that the person didn't have any pancake mix, although I'm sure they didn't have any on them. He was using a nonsensical phrase, and he was speaking it in a dialect. And in dialects such as Black English
and Southern English, they often
employ the use of double negatives to communicate. From a stuffy, proper prescriptionist view, this would come off as uneducated. But it's not. Not really. It's just old school. You know, back in the day with Chaucer and all those fools, they used to pile double negatives all up in that ma. We're just taking it back. Okay, but seriously, when it comes to writing, you generally don't want to use double negatives, with a few exceptions. And the exceptions are why I would consider this hard stance on never using a double negative a myth. Double negatives can be particularly useful in rhetoric when you're trying to accomplish a certain goal. For example, when Homer Simpson was asked by Marge, "Homer, are you licking toads?" His response was, "I'm not licking toads." Which obviously meant that he was licking toads, but he wanted to make it sound like he wasn't. But he did. Another way you can use a double negative is to soften the blow of something that could be potentially offensive. For example, if a guy shows you a picture of his girl, "Ooh, check out this pic. Isn't she hot?" Well, she's not unhot. Technically, you weren't really lying. Okay, so maybe that was a bad example. But if you wanted to say something like, "Your mom's not unattractive." See, now right there, you're not necessarily saying that the person's mom is attractive, but you're also not really calling them ugly, at least not up front. Passive aggression for the win! Another rhetorical device that I use quite frequently is, "Well, you're not wrong." This is kind of a double negative, but it's actually very useful. You see, positive and negative are what we call binary, 0 or 1. There's no in between.
Except 1.5, which doesn't exist in binary.
You're either one or the other. But the world doesn't work like that most of the time. If you want to say someone's not completely right about everything that they're saying, but that they're not necessarily wholly mistaken, you could say, "You're not wrong." The effect in the person's head is positive due to the canceling out of the two negatives. But in reality, you're not really saying that the person's totally right. How does this translate to writing? Not very well. At least not in academic writing, unless you want to make some passive-aggressive type statements about individuals, especially in something like a history paper. The careful and proper use of a double negative can insert some personal opinion where you might be wanting to report on factual things. It's an easy way to politely disagree with the status quo. And I'm all about disagreeing with the status quo. I don't know, man. Do you think that video was good? From a stuffy proper prescriptionist view,